Hey guys, good morning. I apologize if I sound weird. I am a little under the weather. If you saw my last video, then you may remember that I had my mom and my sister over for some fall festivities. It did end up raining, so we didn't get to do everything we wanted, but staying inside and watching scary movies was still pretty fun. This is actually the Sunday morning that they left. I decided I wanted to get up to do something productive with the rest of my day, but couldn't quite muster up the energy to do a big canning project. So I decided to take care of the leftovers that we had. This is the roast chicken that we had for dinner Friday. I've never been very good at picking a chicken clean, so in order to get all of the meat off that I can, I just stick it in the pressure pot with a bit of water for 30 minutes. The next thing that I took care of was this dehydrator full of cranberry pulp. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it when I put it in the dehydrator, but I decided to go ahead and make it into a powder. I don't know what I'll do with the powder. I'm sure I could do many things. I thought maybe reconstituting it into a syrup to put on top of a cheesecake, or even mixing the powder into the batter of a cheesecake and making a cranberry cheesecake, or even like mixing it with sugar and to the point where I could make like roll little candy balls and use those in cookies in place of dried cranberries. I think that would be a cool experiment to try. So I'll have to put some time aside one of these weekends to kind of experiment with what I can do with that. I find that the hardest part with making things into a powder is just getting it started up. It seems like once you've got a little bit of powder in there at the bottom, it tends to grind much better, but until you can get a little bit of powder built up at the bottom, it's pretty slow going. So I just kind of worked at this for a little while, and I did add some cornstarch into this as well, just to help keep the powder from sticking once it's on my shelf stored for a little while. I don't want it to get all clumpy when I take it out to use it. It does make me feel really good to know that I have managed to not waste anything out of the cranberries that I bought, and I think that I will do this for any fruit or vegetable that I end up having some leftover pulp of. If anything, I can make some type of green powder or something to put into our food whenever I want to add some extra nutrients. After I was done grinding the powder, I did pass it through a fine strainer with a whisk. I just kind of whisked it around in there so that the smaller particles of powder would fall down and I could put the larger bits back into my grinder and grind them again to hopefully get them a little bit more finer. I find that doing this just makes the powder really nice and makes it reconstitute a lot easier. And here's our nice, pretty, vibrant powder all finished up. Next, I moved on to powdering some tomato peels from a week or so ago when I processed a bunch of tomatoes. So I just ripped those into pieces and stuck them in the grinder, and I did have to take a break because my grinder was overheating at that point and my chicken was done as well. So I just released that and let it sit until it was done. I did put a towel over the top so that the steam would not damage my counters. I'm not sure if it's safe to do that, but I have always done that and I haven't had a problem with it. So I just kind of covered it with a towel. And once I got the pot out, I picked the chicken off the bones and separated it from all the skin and everything, and then got it packed into my jar really nice. Once I got it packed into the jar, I threw all the leftover bones back into the pot, and then I took some of the liquid from the water that we put in there, and I filled the rest of my jar with it up to the rim. Now, there was some fat in this jar, and I knew that when I poured it in. You're not really supposed to can fat with broths, at least not that much. So for this, I decided to just pour it in and let it sit for a while and see how much fat settled on the top, and that would decide whether I needed to let this cool and take the fat off the top before canning. It ended up turning out great. There was a very thin layer of fat on the top, so I went ahead and decided that I wouldn't need to let this batch of broth chill before I canned it. So I did add more water to the bones and get it back into the pressure pot so that I could then cook some extra broth to fill those extra jars with. Moving on to my failed sourdough loaf. We had some left over. Everybody did eat quite a big chunk of it and said it still tasted good, even though it was kind of dense. But we weren't able to finish it. So instead of letting it go to waste, I am going to go ahead and chop it up into chunks here. And I have some butter seasoned with Italian seasoning over there in that bowl. And I'm going to make croutons. I'm going to coat these pieces of bread in the butter and then put them on my baking sheet. Bake them until they're the desired doneness. I usually like a little bit of brown on them. And then I'll stick them in a freezer bag and pop them in the freezer because of the butter on them. I don't want to leave them out on the counter. Like if I didn't coat them in butter, I could probably put it in a jar and put it on my shelf and it would last like that for a while because it's essentially breadcrumbs at that point, just in bigger chunks. But I really wanted these to be flavored, so I'll store them in the freezer. That way they won't go rancid over time. Here is my baking sheet. It's actually cast iron, and if you've never baked anything on a cast iron baking sheet, I highly recommend it. Not necessarily because of how the results of it, like how it turns out. I mean, it turns out great. I've not had a problem with it, but cleaning this thing is a breeze because there's no nonstick coating on it. So with this bit of bread, I'm doing something different with it. This is some homemade bread that I got out for breakfast one of the days that my mom and sister were over, and it got left out on the counter and now it's stale. So instead of wasting it, I got out my bag from the freezer there that has all of my bread ends in it, and I'm going to stick it with my bread end bag, and when that gets full, I will go ahead and toast it all in the oven and then grind it into breadcrumbs. Here I have a pot that I found at the Goodwill for $6.99. It's just like my other pot that I use for kombucha, except this one's white. So I went ahead and got this scrubbed up, and I decided to put a new spigot on it because I feel like I read somewhere that you shouldn't use plastic ones with kombucha. You should only use metal ones. So I switched both of mine out to metal. So my thought process with making this batch of kombucha, and the reason why I now have 2 kombucha vessels, is I want to basically have a pot that we're drinking out of currently and then have another batch that is processing for the week. Because I find that with the way my... Oh, look, our croutons are done. They look nice. I find that with the kombucha, I know you can do like a continuous brew and keep adding more to your one batch, but I've never been really good at that because of the way my schedule works. It's just easier for me to make one big batch at once, which is great. But then we can't drink any while it's processing for about a week that it processes. So this way I can have like a week rotation. One is that we're drinking out of for the week, and then the other one is processing. By the time we're done with the first week one, the second week will be done, and I'll just start that process over again. So here I'm just taking a bit of my Scoby out from my old one to put it into my new one. And I did rinse it off and cut it down to a nicer piece just to make it look pretty. I don't know, I was in a mood that day and decided to do that, but you don't have to do that. I got my temperature strip on it, put it on its new heating pad, which I found out after reading the instructions on this heating pad that you need a separate piece to control how hot it gets. So I will be ordering that piece here soon so it doesn't overheat. And our second batch of broth was done by this point, and my grinder was cool enough to keep grinding the tomato powder. So here you'll see me slamming the grinder on the counter pretty hard. I hope that doesn't hurt my grinder, but I found that was the best method to get it started up really quick, to get the little bit of powder that I needed to get it going. So that's what works for me. I also got tired of using the whisk for getting the smaller particles of powder out. So just bumping it up against the glass like that seemed to get all of the particles out really nicely. I did attempt to use my mortar and pestle for the last little bit of this that I could not get to grind in the grinder, but that didn't seem to do much either. So I ended up pouring that bit just in with the powder, and I had little bits of chunky in my powder, which I'm not happy with, but I could not for the life of me get that last little bit to grind up really fine. So here I am pouring my powder in. It's more orange than it is red, but I think it looks nice. I still think it's pretty. It's like almost a Cheeto orange, you know. So when making kombucha, I don't like to wait for all the liquid to cool down because if you make it and your tea is really hot, you can't put it in with your Scoby or the heat will kill your Scoby. So I make like a concentrate with hot tea and pour it into my big bucket here, or not bucket, it's a pitcher. I pour it into my big pitcher and then I pour room temperature water into it till I need to fill it up to the gallon mark. And that's how I kind of get it to be a cool enough temperature to just go ahead and throw it in the pot. Here I'm straining out a bunch of our broth, and I realized as I was pouring this that I may have made too much to fit into my pint jars, so I started filling up some quart jars with this broth, and I wasn't really happy with the color of this broth. Like, it looks all right, but usually I add a bunch of stuff into my broth, like onion peels and carrots and celery ends and whatnot, and this time it was just straight up chicken. So I don't think I'll do that next time. But as I was getting these into the canner, I realized I don't think you're supposed to can quart jars with pint jars. I think that's a no-no in the canning world. I did it anyway because I was like, I'm already here. I'm already to this point. I know what I'll do. I'll just can it at the highest possible time. You know, like I'll do it as if I was canning chicken in quart jars. That way I'll be sure that it's safe. Well, that was a bad idea because the broth ended up siphoning pretty bad. I don't think broth is supposed to be heated that long for at that high of a temperature, because as soon as I opened it up, and after I let it cool for a minute, it was just spitting. Like every 5 seconds it would just spit broth out the sides of the cans. It was the craziest thing to watch. So I will not be doing this again in mixing jars. But I mean, it did turn out okay. They all sealed. I just am a little bit sad about all the broth that I lost. So here I'm just getting my tea into its pot, testing it to make sure that it's the right temperature, and I realized quickly that I did not have the spigot closed on this, and tea went everywhere. And I did the same thing, I kid you not, 5 minutes earlier with my water filter. So it was just not a good night for messes for me. So I hope you enjoyed coming along with me today as I took all of my leftovers and turned them into something delicious for the upcoming weeks. And I will see you in the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.